It's 9 o'clock. I think we'll get going. 'Cause we have a lot to cover, and I want to leave time for questions. Thank you for coming at 9 o'clock on the last day of MIX. I know that with all the parties and everything, it's a pretty big effort to get here by 9. So thanks. My name is Kevin Jerstead. I'm the Group Program Manager for WPF, and I'm going to be talking about WPF 4 today. And since every session to be successful needs at least one guy with a British accent, I brought along Mark Wilson-Thomas.
Hi.
Who's going to be talking about Visual Studio and the designer and some of the things that we're doing there. So hopefully show you some stuff that you haven't seen before. So my objectives for this session are just to give you a good, solid overview of what we're doing with WPF 4, building off of what we shared at the PDC. If you are familiar with some of the content that we shared at the PDC around WPF 4, we're going to build on that. And if you're not, it's OK. We'll be reviewing some things. And of course, we're going to show some demos. OK, so doing a lot of stuff in WPF 4. So as you can see, it's a big, long list. Any questions? No. Actually, this is the 4th release for WPF. We started off with V1 and .NET Framework 3.0. Quickly followed by 3.5, and then last summer by a pretty meaty 3.5 SP1. And we rolled right into 4.0 with a set of features and other things that we wanted to do. And I just mentioned here on the side here that all the other just pieces of the other things going in .NET as a reminder that WPF is part of the .NET framework. So there's a lot of stuff going on around the entity framework, around workflow, WCF, all that kind of stuff that is evolving pretty rapidly as well. So I'm going to talk about some of those things. Obviously, can't drill into all of them. But we're going to focus on a few things. What we're doing around Windows 7. Some of the things we're doing around fundamentals. In particular, the things that we're doing that many folks, like such as yourself, have been asking for a while. And supporting apps efforts like Visual Studio 10, which is, as you know, building off of WPF. And then some tooling and workflow. We've, as you saw with Blend 3 and with Visual Studio 10, we're doing quite a bit of improvements around the tooling experience for WPF and Silverlight. OK, so let me switch machines real quick. Let me move this down. Oh, by the way, as part of my ongoing commitment to Twitter, I thought I would do something new in Twitter as I do this session, so I can give my own feedback and sort of. So let's see, slide 4 now. I'll just keep doing that as we make our way through this deck. I'm kidding. I did want to show you this app, though. This is a 1323 Twitter app, which I kind of like. It's got some nice transitions. You can do things like reply, and it's got the nice little in-place flip. It's kind of a nice use of that real estate. It's got some nice, if I click on the reply button, it'll slide real nice. Home. Check it out. It's on 1323.com. It's a nice little WPF app. OK, so the first thing I want to do is show you a WPF 4 application. Now, this is an application that we have been writing over the last couple of weeks. So it's got a lot of rough edges because it's built from WPF 4. And where we're going right now is I have this special touch Dell that's running some sketchy drivers right now, running an interim build of Win 7, running a pre-beta version of Visual Studio with a handcrafted build of WPF. So something could go wrong, but I'm hoping for the best. So let me just go ahead and run this. OK, so the idea behind this application is it's a WPF app, desktop rich client, and it's all around travel, a travel experience. So you're going to plan your itineraries. You're going to blog about your itineraries. You're going to get real-time, up-to-the-minute information on what's going on and the location, and it can go online or offline, all that cool stuff. And this is a sample that we're building out with WPF4 and that we'll eventually share when we get it to a certain point. Let me take you through a couple things that are sort of unique to WPF4 or at least notable. So first of all, the first thing you should notice is at the top we have a ribbon. This is part of the WPF ribbon, which is consistent with the Windows 7 ribbon. And so this is a control that you'll be able to use and data bind to commands and put inside your application very easily. And I can, as you can see, I can use this UI. In fact, up here I've got different services for the map, which lets me pull in information real time from the map data. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But another thing you can see is that we've got, if I right-click on the taskbar, we've got taskbar integration, Windows 7 taskbar integration. If you know about the Windows 7 taskbar, it's a nice way to get past the need for a tray utility and have that stickiness on the desktop to allow users to jump to specific points in your applications or anchor that application to the desktop, give notifications, progress, that sort of thing. It's one of my favorite features of Windows 7, frankly. And then, of course, touch. So let me show you what that does. So I don't have an over-the-shoulder cam, and I apologize for that. So I'm going to turn this around and try it this way. And I realize not everybody's going to be able to see, but I'll do my best. So all I'm doing right now is using some multi-touch gestures to drill in. If I know my way around Seattle, okay. As you can see, as I went in there, the location information changed for the Flickr provider there. In fact, all these things across the top are map point providers using the MEF stuff, which allows us this loose decoupling or loose coupling of functionality. So we can add new MEF components to this dynamically and interface with other types of web data. Okay, so let's talk about, so that's the app. And there's a bunch of other things to the app I can show you. But let me talk for a second about touch. Switching back. And WPF for Win 7. So we have a lot of things we're doing with WPF for Win 7. We wanted to make sure that WPF was the best way to take advantage of Windows 7 innovations, including multi-touch, the taskbar, ribbon, common dialogues, and a bunch of other stuff, the sensor stuff, which I'll talk about in a minute. And you can use all these things with .NET and XAML without having to do a bunch of p-invokes and gnarly other interop code. That's our goal there. For touch, we have been working with the Surface team, which pioneered multi-touch for WPF back in 2002. They've been evolving it since then. And we work with those guys to get a consistent API and implementation inside of WPF4 proper. And that includes UI element changes to support manipulation events, gesture events, as well as the raw sort of input events. And those are all consistent with the Surface folks, as well as the Win 7 implementation. And then we did the implementation for scroll viewer and other controls so that they're multi-touch aware out of the box. Now these things aren't actually in beta 1, or pieces of them are in beta 1. The rest will come in beta 2. So let me show you a demo. There. I want to show you how to do touch in about 10 lines of code using WPF4. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a simple canvas, and I'm going to put an image control on it, and put an initial matrix transform, render transform on it. And the important thing here is that I mark manipulation mode all, so I can get those manipulation events coming through. And then in the handler there, all I'm doing is taking that, that cumulative manipulation data and applying that to my controls matrix, render transform, and that's it. And so let me show you what that looks like. So I get all that with about just a few lines of code. Now, I'm not doing rotation, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to that, uncomment out this line, and say, now let's go ahead and apply the rotation as well. Okay. Reminds me of kind of my first night in Vegas. This is, as well, we have a couple lines of code which we can add for inertia. I'm just playing around with this in this version, so just to see what I could do. Go back here. You can see we can bounce it off the sides. We can throw it around like so. One line of code to do that and control that behavior. OK, very simple sample of how to do touch. There is another part to it. That's the manipulation side. And inside of WPF, we have the manipulation processor that plugs in at the input manager layer at the top and is basically translating this for your components. You can always go to the raw events and do this yourselves, but that's what we have out of the box. And then we have the simple gesture support, which is kind of the same thing. You just enable the event, the gesture events, and then you can handle those events. I just did it as a switch statement here, but you can just keep it straightforward. But I can use the different gestures like the single tap, double tap, hold to enter, various other gestures. There's a bunch. There's a drag and a right drag, and so on and so forth, which you can implement inside your application pretty easily. OK, so while you can create these things yourselves, we're going to provide a set of controls together with the Surface team that you'll be able to reuse inside your application, like the scatter view. If you've seen the Surface with the photos, there's a scatter view control, which we'll be making available with WPF in a toolkit that you can put inside your application. And in general, the consistency for input matters a lot. And so when users see something that looks like a scatter view, they're going to expect it to behave sort of like a scatter view. So it's important for us to provide those controls so that users get that consistent experience. But at the same time, touch is a new experience, so I'm really excited to see how people innovate with that to create some new applications and user experiences. And then have you be able to use that code and those experiences across the different channels. For example, on a Surface, you should be able to take that code and port it to the Surface pretty easily, and vice versa. And now Silverlight's going to have multi-touch, so you should be able to use it there in your web apps as well. So I think it's a pretty good story for touch. I'm pretty excited about that. OK, so I showed you the taskbar integration. Let me just show you what the code is for that, because it's really simple. Sorry, I'm having to switch between these machines. OK, so Samantha Durante gives a really good, thorough talk on the ribbon, but it's pretty straightforward. You describe ribbon groups and ribbon commands, and you can do this fully in XAML. Now, in the ribbon release that we put out there at the PDC timeframe in October, it was a CTP, but we're improving that, and we'll be releasing an update to that in the next several months, which will be a full-blown WPF control. In this example, we don't yet support data binding and some other things, so we have to use some other types of techniques here. But it will be a control that you would behave just like menu or any other control as you'd expect. But it's very straightforward to do this in WPF. Okay. Similarly, with the location or with the taskbar, we've done the work to make it really easy for you inside of your app to declare the jump list and other items within your application. And so I can sort of just say, in this case, jump list, jump task, give it a string, and then give it a command line argument, which I would then handle inside of my application. And so, pretty straightforward. Let me show you what that will look like. Let me minimize all here. So as I can create bookmarks there, make them readily accessible. If I click on Locate Me, I can launch the application, have it do something smart. Hopefully this will work. Okay. Okay, that's showing off another feature that we have, which is the Windows code pack for .NET, which allows us to get access to a bunch of features that are shipping in Win 7 using managed code without having to write the p invokes and other in or out code. So in this case, we've done the work to show off or to integrate the sensor stuff. Let me just show you what that looks like. So full disclosure, I can't get a signal in here, so I basically hard-coded going to the Venetian, but you know it does work. It's basically all you do is you include a reference to this library, the sensor library, and then you basically get you set a timer to get the sensor information from the driver, and then set your longitude and latitude, and then set your zoom level, and that's it. And so as you're walking around, you're getting the sensor information, getting the real-time map data with the other map data appearing inside of your application. Really simple stuff. That's the entire code right there. There's no interop code needed, none of the other stuff. So pretty clean story. Okay. Talked about that. So there's a bunch of services there: restart, recovery, transactions, search, power, and the sensor stuff itself is pretty rich. It has motion sensors and some other things, and all that's part of the code pack. And you can get more information on the code pack as it evolves at this URL. I encourage you to check that out and give us feedback. Okay, talked about the ribbon. Okay, at this point, I want to ask Mark to come talk about Visual Studio Design.
That's fine, Kevin. I hoped you would. As the token Brit on the platform, I have to be invited up at some point, right? So, where are we? Here we go. So, I don't know how many of you have seen the talk that Samantha Duranty and I gave at PDC this last year. A few, a scattering. So, for some of you, this is going to be a little bit of review, but hopefully for the rest of you, it's all going to be just lots of fun. So, I want to get started here. What I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of a tour. Rather than talking about Visual Studio features, let's show you them, of what it's going to be like to develop a WPF application inside Visual Studio 2010. And to do that, we're going to build out a small kind of real estate application front office thing. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to show us the viewings for a particular set of properties that are on the market today. Now, I'm sorry about the real estate thing. There's really nothing you can do once you've set your demos in stone. But this is where we get started. The data sources window is your new best friend to get your scaffolding up and running for a WPF application. So if you've done this in Visual Studio 2008, you've spent a great deal of time working away in XAML or working away in C# or VB to build up whatever data source you require for your application and then start building up the initial data bindings. If you've worked in Windows Forms before, any of you worked in Windows Forms? So a few Windows Forms scattering around. You'll have seen this wizard before because it's been around for quite a while, but now we've made it work for WPF applications. And you'll see it allows you to pick from databases, services, objects as your base data source. So we're going to use a database in this case and a strongly typed data set, but it could equally well be some middle tier object that you've brewed up that talks to your back end. So here I'm going to choose the Southridge database, and it's going to helpfully save my connection string for me. And here it's enumerated the tables that are in that data source that I just brought up. So I'm going to just pick out a few fields which I'm going to need for my form. And down here, this one, primary photo, which you'll see is kind of interesting when we get to it later. And there are a couple of related tables here, the neighborhoods and viewings, which we want some data from as well. So we hit finish here, and what's happening under the covers is that if you keep a careful eye on the Solution Explorer, you'll see that it's producing an XSD strongly typed data set there. And that just allows you to make really direct access. It's essentially built a proxy layer for you to talk to that database with. And it's also populated the data sources window here, which is actually now your entry point for creating UI without having to type laborious lines of code. So I'm going to crack that open. You'll see it holds the fields that I had put in. And I'm going to choose details in this case. And I simply drag drop onto my form here. Little restriction. What you need to remember to do is build when you've done that. That's actually a restriction we're going to take away when we finally ship. But if you hit that when you're evaluating the beta, then just need to build. That's all you need to do. Drag and drop. And you'll see that it's, we'll just zoom in to get a closer look at that. Created for us a simple details view which has extracted the labels from the field labels. And here the text boxes you'll see in the XAML down here are already bound up to the appropriate fields. In fact, it's done a great deal more than that under the hood. It's actually created a collection view source, populated it, put it in the right place in the resources, none of which required you to really understand anything about what was going on. So you can see that it's a whole lot easier to get started. Can we hold questions until the end? Because I'm sure there'll be a bunch, and we really need to keep some momentum going here. But yeah, I'm really interested in your questions and feedback here. So the text box is bound up already. Everything's looking good. There's one little tweak that we do have to do here, which is also something that won't be in the final shipping product. We have to scoot into the code that it's created for us. And the collection view source that it's created is all beautifully initialized, but unfortunately, it's not actually at the top of the set. And these two lines of code that I'm about to paste in here that fix that problem. We'll fire it up. And we can see that we've got the first, without actually having to write a single line of data binding code, without having to write any C#, we've got our first piece of scaffolding up. Now, clearly, this doesn't look the way you want your app to look, right? But what it's done is it's saved you a ton of work in getting to this point so that you can focus on the things that are more important to you and actually get yourself, productive. With the next layer of tools, we've provided some great tools for getting your scaffolding up, but we've also provided some work that will help you to customize once you've got to this stage. Now, the smart amongst you will have noticed that primary photo wasn't a terribly interesting piece of display there, and that's because primary photo had mapped to a text box, and what we really wanted was an image. So what if it's picked the wrong thing for you? How do you customize that? Okay, so here's my primary photo. I drag and drop. And if we take a look at what's happened to our photo, our image here, we'll see that it's popped into the source field of that image, the binding that we needed. And so it's pretty smart. It'll match up types that, with the appropriate default fields within controls. And what we now get is something that looks a little bit more interesting. There we go. So now we've got our photo coming up instead of the URL for that photo. For our next step, you'll see that it's spotted that we have a foreign key relationship here with the viewings field. So this is the viewings that belong to that particular listing. We're going to leave the list in place here and drag drop. What it's going to do for us now is it's actually created a list view. In the final bits, this will actually be the new WPF data grid control that actually gets created here. But for the time being, a list view does pretty well. And in fact, one of the things you should really understand if you don't already about WPF is that often a list view will do just as well as a data grid if you're not going to do data input or some of the more sophisticated things that data grids support, because they allow you to do the kind of restyling that gets whatever look you want, just using the same techniques that you used with repeaters in ASP.NET if you've been around that world. So just a little plug for a particular thing there, but just want to let you know that you can get quite a lot out even today with the list view. So what's the list view that it's created for us? Well, it's literally taken every column, every field that we had in our drag drop and created a column for it and bound that column to the selected view. And once again, no code required. There's a little bit of work required here, though. I do need to be able to move back and forth through my set. And so I'm going to create a button or two. And we're going to do some work to set those up. Rather than have you be bored by me talking as I code, I'm just going to steal some code here and drop that into my code behind. It's just a couple of button handlers. And all these are literally doing is the same kind of work as the one we dropped in at the start, which sets us up to go to the top of the set. So in this case, we're going to have a forward button, and I'm going to search for the click event there. And sure enough, it's found my forward button. And we'll select the other one. And this one's going to be the back button. And let's have a look for the content. So we now have forward and back button functionality on our form. Let's fire it up again. Now you'll see that it's a slim market at the moment, so there's not many viewings. But there's one. Oh, look, happy estate agent. We have actually got something out there. So this is just showing you how quick and easy it is with very, very little effort to build up a simple master detail. Once again, this isn't the look that you probably want at this point in time, but what you have got is an awful lot of that underlying scaffolding functionality done for you without any work at all. Now, at the next level, you really start to want to customize what you've done, okay? So you've produced the basics of your form, you've got it working in the sort of functional way that you want, but you really want to move down to the next level and start making things look a little better. And some of the work that you'll want to do there is work that you'll want to do in Expression Blend if you want to do radical reskinning or restyling of your application. But a great deal of it you can get done right here, right now in Visual Studio 2010. And what I'm going to do just is dive into that. I'm using the document outline view here. I'm going to dive into the data template for that list view. And I'll pick out a particular column. So some of the columns in there, there's actually one here which is actually called is proceeding, and that's just a checkbox at the moment. It's automatically created a checkbox for us inside the data template for the list view. Well, that's really not what I want. I want something a little bit more exciting than a checkbox. So I'm actually just going to comment that guy out. And this is the last time you'll see me dropping into the XAML here, unless I really want to. So here's the rectangle, and you'll notice that it's selected up here. And that rectangle that we've got, we're going to be able to customize that thing. And what we're going to do in a very short space of time is create a little traffic light. So it's going to be kind of red-green. So to do that, we're going to use the new data binding expression builder. What this tool does is it gives you a full view on the entire WPF and, in fact, Silverlight data binding API. Okay? It lets you pick stuff, and you'll notice that it's picked up the ambient data context, which is actually the one that was created for us by the data source window. We can drop into the path here, and we can find our proceeding field. That's the one that we want. We don't have to know the schema of the thing we're looking at because it inspects it for us. Now, the proceeding field is a Boolean field. It's coming up from the database. That's not the type that we need. We need something that's going to be able to be a fill, which means it needs to be a brush. So to get that to work, we really need to use a converter. I have some converters that I've brewed up already in the project. And you'll notice that it's picked out in bold. If I had more converters, you'd actually see that only the ones that match the pairing are actually bolded up here. And sure enough, we see our Boolean to brush converter. Now, the chances are we're going to want to use that again. So it's also kind enough to create a new resource for us so we can refer to that particular converter again anytime we need to use it. And this is just one of those tedious tasks that we've automated for you. You can also put that at any scope that's visible in your project at this point. So if you have resource dictionaries that are already merged in through your app.xaml, they would appear in this list as well. In this case, I'm going to keep it at the window scope. And you'll see it's created my brush. Everything's good. And we'll just take a quick look at the code that it's produced here. So it's actually produced all of that binding for us. There's the proceeding field being bound in. And it's also done some work up in the top section of our XAML in the window.resources to set up the reference to that resource and the XMLNS declaration, all of which you had to know precisely 0 about to actually get it working, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to fire that thing up. And there's our traffic lights. So once again, very little code required. In fact, pretty much none. And finally, no presentation about WPF would be presentable really without us talking a little bit about application of styles. And I'm going to do one final thing just to set you up here. So let's suppose that we're a little bored with our buttons and we want to play around some. You'll have probably noticed already when I looked at Phil that we actually now have a brush editor inside of Visual Studio. That's nice. It has some great features that let us access pretty much the entire surface area of the brush API in a fairly familiar fashion. But because I'm me and I'm also, you know, a bit of a magpie, I'm going to use this nice little eyedropper thing. And I like this Visual Studio orangey color up here. So I'm going to pick that out. And have it fail on me. There we go. We'll pick a less interesting color then. That does work when you do it right. There's a few little bugs. This is a very early build. This will all be fixed up in the beta. So we select that, and it should have applied that to our button. The demo gods are not with me today. There we go. I'll put one on. Excellent. So all that's applied to the button. You can't really see it, so I'm going to zoom in a little just to give you a better view. Using a handy-dandy Windows 7 feature that you may or may not have discovered yet. You can see that we've got a nice brownish view on there, because brown's cool. What I'm going to do next is, I've decided I like that color. I'm going to extract the value to a resource. Okay? I'm not going to step you through all of the steps here because we are limited on time, but that same dialog you saw for creating the resources, that would allow me to extract that style right up into a resource and then apply it using a resource browsing experience. And that gets us pretty well down the road to if you've got a designer who's created a nice resource dictionary for you full of wonderful styles that you can apply to things, this is a really neat way of picking them out. So when we do an apply resource, we get a dialog like this, which allows us to see not only into the regular stuff, but as you'll see, into the system colors. So if you want to use system colors now, you've got quick access to them, and that's just really easy to do. So if I just wanted to pick out all the brushes, I can actually just narrow it down to that, or maybe I want the dark brushes. And you'll see that it narrows the selection down, allows us really quickly and easily to find and apply resources that we put into our project. Now, I can't finish without a nod to those of you who've spent so much time building WPF applications so far and learnt an awful lot of XAML. So back in the XAML editor, there's a feature that we hope you'll like. I'm just going to drop down into that list view again and find my column. And let's say that we've spent a great deal of time learning XAML, and what we really, really want is a way to have some help working with markup extensions and we want to do that fill stuff that I just did, but we really want to do it down here. And here's the good news. So you have IntelliSense for markup extensions, and you have it. Also, that works. It works just great for all the stuff you need for resource picking as well. I should, with fair disclosure, tell you that it is not quite as powerful as the picker that you saw in the property inspector, in as much as it doesn't allow you to find the keys. So it's the static parts of the markup extension IntelliSense that are here at this point in time. We would love to include the lookup stuff as well, but it's just one of those decisions that we need to make in terms of getting this product to you on time at this point. And you can actually get that functionality quickly and easily through the data binding picker right now. So if you've forgotten the key name, you forgot to put it in the paste buffer before you got here, you can always go use the picker, and you can mix and match. You can use both, and it just works with your workflow according to whatever you want to do. So that's pretty much Visual Studio 2010 WPF functionality in a nutshell. We hope you're going to like it. And I should also mention in passing that everything you see before you, the shell of Visual Studio itself, is now a WPF application. The text editor, WPF, customizable in WPF using the Managed Extensions framework. So this is pretty cool stuff. It's moving on pretty fast, and we hope you're going to enjoy it. If you want to see a little bit more about this kind of stuff, I have another session this afternoon, T73M, 2 o'clock p.m. If you're not on your plane by then, come see it, and we'll dig in a little bit more. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mark. Pretty exciting stuff there. And how many people like what they see with Blend 3? Okay, great. All those improvements are there for WPF, and that includes the behaviors, the VSM, the transition animations, and other things. So we're very excited about what's happening there as well. Obviously not enough time to go into that, but that's a big part of what we've been focusing on for the last couple months, actually many months. So let me move on to the fundamentals. Now, some people say fundamentals are boring, but this is really important stuff. It includes application deployment, framework deployment, text clarity. So let's just drill into a couple of these things. So graphics. With any release of WPF, we do work around graphics in terms of innovation or in terms of performance, usually both. And this release is no different. One of the things that we're doing in WPF is a feature called cached compositions. And just switch machines here. This is, no matter how quickly how fast a machine or a system can render vector graphics, there will always be scalability limits. And so, by caching rendered vector data as a bitmap, we can reuse that data, for transitions, for effects, for alpha, for all kinds of things, without having to go back to the CPU and regenerate that all the time. And so that's a pretty important tool for you as you're building your apps, so to get the kind of performance you need. So let me just show you what that looks like. This was done by David Teitelbaum on my team, who's a graphics PM. And I don't know if you notice, all I'm doing here is just moving this vector data up and zooming in on it, performing render transforms. As you can see, it's a little bit jerky. There's a little glitching there because it's doing a lot of work. At every point, it's basically regenerating that vector data. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this new caching API. And it's really complicated. You have to write cache mode, basically true. That's it. And there are some knobs on it, like you can control whether or not you enable clear type, because there are trade-offs there about when you're doing text, and whether you snap to device pixels. But generally, you can ignore those things unless you're doing specific things with text. And so I'll just go ahead and run that. It's quite a bit smoother. Okay, so that's an important tool for you. Now there are trade-offs. The more data that you cache, the bigger the memory consumption on the GPU. So you have to be smart about it. And if you you need to decide how big of an initial image you want to set. Like I could come in here and say that I want it to be a very large image, and then I'm storing even more data, or smaller data. It just depends on what your scenario is. But it's a very useful tool. Okay, another thing that we've done in WPF4, which has been a major undertaking for us, is improved text rendering. When we designed 3.0, or the first version of WPF, we designed it with resolution independence in mind. And the idea being that on different resolutions, high resolution, low resolution, your UI would hold up and not get really small and unusable. And so we designed it to be pixel basically unaware. And that works fabulous for many scenarios. However, with text, since we're rendering on with an approach called ideal width, where we're not snapping to pixel boundaries so that we can pull that off, sometimes at small text sizes in particular, or at 96 dpi or lower, that text can get a little bit muddy and a bit murky. And people have complained about that with WPF. So what we've done is we've used this new technology that we've been working on with Windows called Direct Write, which gives us a new rendering channel to give us what we call compatible with GDI clear type technology rendering. And the results are quite good. And sorry I don't have a live demo for you today. And I don't think it would translate very well anyway to a screen like this. But this is basically the results. On the left-hand side, you have the new WPF text. And on the right-hand side, you have GDI. And some people think that the WPF text that we have is just sometimes slightly better in some situations. It really depends. So we're pretty excited about getting this in. And I think this will be a very, very good feature for many scenarios. Particularly, VS Editor is now, and the UI is now WPF, so this was an important feature for us to get in. Similarly, to text, UI had some of the same issues where we wouldn't render the UI elements on pixel boundaries. And so in 3.0, we gave designers and developers some control over that using a technique called layout snapping. But it was a little bit complex. We got feedback that didn't quite do what people wanted, so sort of went back to the drawing board with Silverlight and produced a new API for doing this called layout rounding, which is much simpler. Basically, all you need to do is on your visual tree is just at the top container, say use layout rounding equal true, and we'll basically round up or down the UI on pixel boundaries, and you get pretty good results. So we're pretty excited about getting that in as well, and this is one of those features that Silverlight has as well, so that's great. So the net effect of these two features is you can design UI now that scales across all kinds of resolutions and holds up, and yet is really crisp. And so we're going to do a couple blogs and samples to show you how to take advantage of these things. Okay, another thing to talk about: framework deployment. How many people have struggled with framework deployment? A few. Okay. So in 3.5 SP1, we introduced this setup package or option called the client profile, which is a smaller package that installs more quickly, allows you to sort of compose the setup package with your application, all that good stuff. But because it was a service pack, we were constrained as to the number of things we could change. And so the net effect was that the client profile for 3.5 SP1 only worked for clean Windows XP machines. Basically, there's no framework at all installed, which is a pretty small subset of the scenarios out there. It does solve some problems, but what we wanted was something that worked the same everywhere. So .NET 4 is a side-by-side release. In other words, 4.0 sits side-by-side with the 3X stack. And that enables us to introduce the client profile and have that work across all configurations the same way. So we're very excited about that because it's going to greatly simplify things. And of course, Visual Studio and .NET now support multi-targeting. So you get to go into Visual Studio. You can say, OK, I want to target 4.0 client SKU and have that just work throughout the tool. So a little bit more about the client SKU itself. And smaller, faster. The client SKU is designed for client scenarios. So it doesn't have, say, ASP.NET in it or some of the other things that you won't need in a client app. And so we got that down to, instead of being 60 megabytes, around 21, 22 megabytes at this point. It could grow a little bit or change a little bit, but that's basically where we're at today. And then we did a bunch of work around optimizing the engine and so forth so that it installs faster. And as I mentioned, it works across all configurations. So you as a developer get to just include this web bootstrapper component inside of your deployment package. It's 280K, so it's pretty small. And then we'll do all the heavy lifting to figure out what you need on your machine and then pull down the right bits, and the rest is magic. So very excited about that. On the actual experience side of it, we have some new tools to allow you to pull these things together inside of an integrated install package so that, because users, they think about not .NET framework stuff, they think about your app. And so we want to make sure that you can pull that all together inside of one experience, including your dependencies, and have that be one window, one progress bar, the minimum number of clicks. I think we got it down to 3 clicks. And so for many applications, it's 5 minutes or less for the average user in the US to get the framework and the app. So depending on the app size, of course. Very excited about that. So do try this out and give us your feedback. There's a sample called Photosuru on photosuru.com that if you happen to have a clean XP machine, you can try this out and you get a glimpse of the kind of direction we're going. We're still making improvements in 4.0, but you can see the basic install experience and how to chain those things together. And then we're producing this tool, which I want to make you aware of, called the Client Profile Configuration Tool, which will allow you to, in a wizard, create these packages for the client profile. So it's pretty handy. OK, so talking about click once and application deployment for a moment. Click once, I think not everybody is aware of click once. How many people know what click once is and use it? Oh, OK, never mind. That's pretty much the entire room. OK. So since 3.5, we've been making a number of improvements to it, including command line arguments, file associations, support for Firefox, and that sort of thing. And then in 4.0, we're providing this feature that enables you to completely take control of the experience so that there's no click once UI at all. You can do it all with custom UI inside of that custom application installer or what have you. But I do want to show you one feature that isn't particularly new, but I'm not sure everybody's aware of it. Make sure I get this. OK, so say you have an application, and then you get a new version of the application. In the past, I think what you'd see is what happened there? You'd see the click once UI come up every time you launch the application, which can get in the way of the user experience. So I hope you didn't miss that there. What it did was I basically took the V2 version, deployed it on the server, and the application automatically detected that in the background, and then now says to me, would you like to restart your app now? Which I'm going to do. And we got V2 of the application. So there was no click once UI as I started the application to get in the way. There was no sort of trust dialogues. The user's already agreed to install your application and the associated updates. You can provide a more seamless experience. And this is possible with just a few lines of code. Let me show you what that looks like. Really straightforward stuff on the deployment application stuff from click once. You basically check for updates in the background on a timer or at whatever frequency you deem appropriate. And then if there's an update, you just update the app. And in this case, what we're doing is we're using the WinForms thing to restart the application. And then and that's it. Really simple. So we'll publish this sample so that everybody's aware of it. The Chirp application, the Blue application that I showed you, the Twitter app, is doing this today. And I think it's nice because I don't have to worry about when I get my updates or clicking on things. I just get the benefits of click once without the UI getting in the way. Okay. Let's talk about controls for just a minute. At the PDC last year, we announced the release of our toolkit, which included our first data grid, the CTP for the ribbon, the date picker, visual state manager, those kinds of things. And so we're busy in WPF4 basically integrating those things into the platform itself, getting the tooling right and all those sorts of things. And so that's pretty much the focus of our control efforts in WPF4 proper. However, we are working with our controls team Sean Burke on our team, to deliver more controls for WPF, chart controls and some other ones that people were asking for. So we're not done yet, so there's more to come here. But I do want to make you aware that we do have an update to our toolkit that's available today. You can go up there on Coplex right now and check it out. If you've been using the data grid, we've got some 50 bug fixes and improvements that we've made, also to date picker and whatnot. So, and then we also have a new thing as part of the toolkit. We have themes, which let me just show you what those are like. So there's a theme pack now for WPF that you can use, and it's quite simple. You just pick up the resource dictionary for the corresponding theme and drop it into your app. But I'll just show you some of these. Twilight, Twilight Dawn, Twilight Dusk, Twilight Night. I didn't pick these names. Bubble White, Bubble Gum, Bubble Gum. Anyway, so there's a set of themes that you can use out of the box, so you don't have to recreate these yourselves. So that's part of the toolkit as well. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up what we have for the WPF4. It's the best way to take advantage of Windows 7 with multi-touch and the taskbar and so forth. We've really gone to a lot of trouble to make sure that you can write great WPF applications and Win 7 applications easily from WPF. We've done some really solid work around fundamentals with deployment and text clarity and cache composition and accessibility and a bunch of other things, which we didn't have time to go into, but we'll be blogging about those and putting videos up on Channel 9 in the next several weeks. And then most excited about all the work that we've done around the tooling experience, both for Blend 3 and for Visual Studio 10. There's a bunch of features there that people have been asking for, and I think that puts us on a good solid ground. At this point in the project, where we're just getting to our beta, it's really important to get your feedback on what you think of the deployment experience, what you think of the configuration designer, what you think of the text clarity. Does it work for you? Because the text clarity is one of those subjective things. So there's and the touch APIs. Does it or do we get it right? Are there things that you think we should be doing differently? So that will be coming up here in the next several weeks. So I'd appreciate your feedback. So at this time, I want to take some questions. I want to ask the second Brit to come up and join me. He's my boss, Ian Elson Taylor. He's the general manager for WPF and Silverlight. So. Yeah, you probably want to come to the mic so that people on camera can hear your questions.
Okay, so I've got one question about the data source wizard.
Yep.
You were using data sets. Is it possible to use entity framework?
At this point, am I on? Yep. At this point, that's not possible, but I think that's something, it's a piece of feedback that we're actually going to take into account, and you're not the first person to ask the question, so entity framework support is definitely something that has been requested, so we'll take that into account and we'll look at that.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I noticed one bullet point on the slides, full trust XBAPs. Is that going to be in this release? Is it in the beta?
Yeah, so let me explain that list. Nothing's final. Nothing's final until we actually ship, but that's something that I'm looking at. Is that something that's interesting to you?
Very much.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
2 votes for that.
Okay.
Regarding multi-touch, will there be a nice and easy way to include custom gestures?
Custom gestures, yes. There is a way to provide custom gestures. In fact, we do have a vendor here that's done a bunch of custom gesture work. IdentityMine, I know for a fact, has done a bunch of custom gesture work. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Is there a deep zoom control coming, viewer control coming for WPF?
Coming.
Coming.
Yes, coming. We are. I can't promise a date right now. It's all of our controls are a prioritization exercise. So we want to finish up some things we've done with ribbon and charts and so forth. But we're working on it, and the deep zoom team is working on it with us. So. Yep.
For the text completion, have you done any work with relative source in binding to improve any sort of text completion?
I can't hear you very well.
I'm sorry. For text completion in binding, have you done any work with relative source tags?
For IntelliSense, you mean?
Yeah, for IntelliSense.
Yes. IntelliSense for the relative source in the editor.
For the relative source, yeah. In fact, all of the sources are actually supported.
Okay.
So what I didn't show you, the demo is kind of truncated. If you take a look at the PC45 on the PDC videos, you'll see me using that there for doing relative source, ancestor bindings, all of that kind of stuff. So pretty much the whole API there is exposed.
Excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
absolutely.
Great.
That's great.
Thank you.
So the Surface SDK 2.0 will be compatible with the WPF4, right? So how about the object recognition portion of the Surface API? Is it going to be kind of integrated?
No, we have no plans to do the object recognition because there really isn't hardware to support it right now.
Right.
I mean,
that needs the camera support,
right.
you know.
But when I write the application, can I write, just thinking in terms of WPF API, and it will just roll in naturally, or something that is kind of separate from an object recognition perspective?
I think.
I don't know. I think we'll have to go back and look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds.
I mean, it's one of those things that we just said we didn't think it applied this version. Just aren't that many devices are going to be capable of this.
Okay. And I have a second question regarding Silverlight and the API. Because today they're kind of migrating, but what are the plans for example, the new 3D projection thing, in Silverlight?
Yeah.
Is that something that's going to be in WPF4 or it's just Silverlight?
Well, we're not putting in WPF4 because we have true 3D. Not that their 3D isn't true, but I mean, it's just that we've got the full model thing. And so that we're not urgently putting that in. I think we are considering that for the next vNext, though, because it's a nice convenience.
And you should go look at, Greg Schechter on our team blogged how to do this sort of simple plane style 3D projections. So he wrote the sample plane iterator, which was the basis for the work that we did in Silverlight. So you can kind of do this today in WPF if you just use that sample, and it goes way beyond, because we, as Kevin said, since we can use the full 3D support in WPF, you can go much further than we can with the simple 3D support in Silverlight. But it's a good request to just make sure we have the same tags so it's easier to move code back and forth. So we should look at
So it's almost like an overall.
Oh, you doing all right? Okay, there you go. Thanks, Jaime. So yeah, we'll do the wrappers, and we will have wrappers, and so it'll make it easy to share the code.
Learn something new every day. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Thank you.
He actually took one of my questions about the projection, just because it's kind of a pain when you port from Silverlight to WPF and something isn't the same. But my other question was about effects and pixel shaders and so forth. One problem I run into a lot is if you want to, for a real-world app, you want to disable effects on lower-end machines, but the only way to do it now is to null it out, and then all your animations break, and then you have to go through all this headache of, turning off your animations and everything. Is there a way to just disable an effect coming? Just like is enabled as false?
There's lots of ways you can do this. It's not an automatic, like, just disable effects.
Yeah.
But the classic thing a lot of people do is detect the tier and then just apply different styles. And so you have that sort of high-end style that would have an effect on it, and the animations would be included in the style.
Gotcha.
And then if you're on a lower tier stuff, just skip all of that. So we should maybe talk offline about how to do that easily. Or talk to Jaime. I know
Thanks.
some people will set, like, when we do the effects in software, they're kind of proportional to the number of pixels you're messing with. So often you can, on lower end hardware, just sort of, like, instead of doing a shadow that's 15 pixels blurry, do a shadow that's 1 pixel blurry, and just detect it. And so you keep the effect, you just limit it to the hardware that's available. So there's and it depends on the scenario about whether those effects are kind of gratuitous in a good way, but not essential. And then some effects are essential for the user experience, and you really can't turn them off. And only sort of developer designer can determine that. So talk to Jaime, who can go through some practical examples. That might be something we should blog about and make it clear about how we can do that, so we can handle the range of hardware.
Thanks.
Great question.
Since VS 2010 is built on top of the WPF, is there improvements in the designer speed? Because in 2008, I find out I have to turn the designer off because it slows down the UI too much. Once they're content gone rich, and you keep having to press that reload after you do a certain amount of changes.
So there's a couple of things you addressed there, and yes, I can absolutely say that we're focused on both of them. So the gold bar, which everybody loves to hate, we're definitely working hard on reducing the number of occasions when you'll even see that thing. So, for instance, one that I can say for certain, if you ever edited the root of your container, you would always see that wretched gold bar, and you'd just be screaming, "Why on earth can't they press the button for me?" There is actually a good reason for that, and that's because we don't want to reload everything else that you happen to have loaded, and there are good performance reasons why we had it there. But we've done some tweaking, and we've managed to eliminate probably, all of the root edit gold bars, and a good number of the other ones are actually gone. We're putting some serious effort into performance tuning on VS10, and that's absolutely happening right now. What you'll see in the beta won't be the best performance test bench. It will be something that you can actually use, but it won't be the standard you want to measure whether we're going to hit the performance goals with, because obviously you tend not to optimize your performance until towards the end of the cycle, and we're working into that now. But we're definitely committed to improving that performance, because we hear an awful lot of feedback on that exact front that people turn off by default, simply because they can't bear the load time that we have. So we're definitely aware of it. We're definitely working on it hard, so we're setting a pretty high standard for ourselves this time. We hope it's high enough to meet your goals.
Great, thanks.
I'm somewhat famous for saying we're never done with performance.
We're never done with performance.
We only make the percentage of the room happier each time.
Yes.
In regards to WPF4 3D, are there going to be any major changes or improvements, such as surface paths instead of meshes?
No.
So it's just staying as is? Any performance improvements?
Well, the cache composition stuff should apply to that as well, but not explicitly.
There's nothing dramatic. Maybe we can talk offline. You can send us some feature requests. The 3D in WPF is sort of just a layer on top of DX, and so the sort of performance characteristics you get tend to be a lot to do with the performance characteristics of the underlying DX. Now, what we've seen...
Well, it's retain mode. So
Sorry?
It's retain mode, so it's not exactly...
Well, it's retain, sure. Well, we add the retaining part on top. So there's a couple of things that we've done. Well, a couple of things that we kind of get for free, and that the drivers are a lot better now. Time has passed. New DX drivers tend to be better performing than some of the older drivers, and we're seeing that a lot with Windows 7. People are trying out the beta and going, wow, everything's faster, and it's just... the vendors have done a lot better DX drivers.
Still, manipulating meshes is not easy.
Well, the other thing we're doing is we're trying to integrate DX better, and we did a lot of work in 3.5 SP1 so that if you don't want a retained system, which tends to be really good for UI kinds of 3D things, but not the sort of very deep sort of DX-y kinds of 3D things, that we did a lot of work that we showed at PDC about how to better integrate DX.
Yep, saw that.
And it's not going to be in
D3D
WPF4, but in future versions of WPF, we're going to continue to improve that so that we can focus on the things that we think we're good at in the higher level, mixing 2D and 3D and documents and text and UI, and you can always drop down to DX to get the best performance. And so there's a bunch of stuff coming in Windows 7 to make that easier.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm really short. I actually have two questions. The first one is we have always had problems with the shifting of the images, and we were trying out the snap to device pixels, and there was always a limitation if we had something that was floating either vertically or horizontally, meaning you can stretch on either side so that it's not anchored either to the left or the top. It doesn't matter if we turn it on or off, it would still be shifted. So does the layout rounding solve this issue?
Yeah, that should. Actually, that will force the rendering of the image to be aligned with pixels.
I think that was one of the limitations we had with the pixel snapping stuff.
Yeah.
And
Right.
this will help solve.
Jaimi's nodding, so he's probably tried it.
Layout rounding.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's only in WPF4. It's not. We would have to. Okay, so the second question is regarding resolution independent or independence, the noun form. When we're in a situation where we're actually integrating WPF into an existing MFC application, so there's certain elements of it is WPF, certain elements is not. So when we have, let's say the DPI is cranked up, we can see a huge difference between the two different elements. So graphics in the WPF objects are scaled up because of the DPI, and there's no way of turning that off. So we have issues where
you should be able to, if you wanted to keep it the same as your, what is it? Is it a WinForms app?
MFC.
MFC.
You should be able to set it pixels.
So to scale up the graphics on MFC?
We'll do it as 96 DPI pixels. So you have to set a transform on the root to undo the DPI-ness that we're doing. Or you can fix the MFC part of it as well. And it's more work to make your Win32 app high DPI aware. But it's not insurmountable. We have a few posts on MSDN that sort of go through the kind of the steps that we're doing in WPF automatically, the kinds of code you'd have to write to refresh your MFC application. And so that if it's your app and you have access to the source, that can be the easiest thing to do. I know a lot of people integrate third-party controls that then aren't in MFC and that aren't high DPI aware, and that can be a problem.
Well, they just go the other way too, and as you said, do the transform.
Yeah, or you can just do the sort of undo the DPI-ness.
On the WPF side?
We kind of like the high DPI support, so I encourage everyone.
Well, our issue is that we have raster images, so having it scale up, we get really fuzzy images. So we would rather turn the WPF off.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's
I would. Okay, there you go. Okay, so for
talk to Jaime.
Yeah, we should have Jaime come up and just answer more of these questions. So that's a great suggestion. So yeah, you can for those who maybe didn't hear, you can wrap. If it's just the images you want to do, you can wrap the image and do the math yourself and just pick the right image size that maps. That's a good question.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Hi. For the IntelliSense for markup extensions, any thought about making that extend down to the path for binding expressions? Like if you did a declarative?
Yeah, that was the point that I was making about the fact that it doesn't right now.
Okay.
And that's definitely something we want to do, and it's kind of high on the not quite yet list.
Okay.
Would be about the best characterization of it right now. We recognize it's a really useful thing to do. Right now you can, as I mentioned in the talk, get to that functionality using the picker, but you just can't get to it using the editor. So we have done the work to actually parse and edit those lists. There are actually some technical issues there because when people do choose to disable, the designer view, which
Yes.
people have done for performance reasons, as we've mentioned earlier. We don't actually have the model to work from, which is the place where we get all of that data that we use to populate that picker. So there are some issues there with getting it to work in that environment. So we are working on it. It's definitely high on our list, and you're another person to add a +1 to on that, I'm guessing, yeah?
Thanks.
So you prefer to work in XAML, I'm guessing?
Yeah, and a lot of folks, we're encouraging folks to do, maybe we shouldn't, but we encourage them to do their data context declaratively where possible. And so they're saying, well, if you know that we're going to be bound to this type, couldn't you infer the path expressions?
Right, now, there's some interesting things that you should definitely come to my talk this afternoon if you can, or see it on video. We want to talk about some stuff that we're doing around design time data contexts there, which is absolutely going to help for that scenario.
Thanks.
Out of curiosity, the Touch SDK, is that available for WinForms as well?
The Touch SDK isn't available for WinForms, but I do believe there's as part of the code pack, that they're providing some touch functionality there for WinForms.
Okay. I've searched around on MSDN, and I'm having a bit of trouble finding a functional gap report between WinForms and WPF to be able to compel my customers to go towards one or the other. Does something like that exist?
We have a white paper online for sort of making the decision between WinForms and WPF. Did you check that out?
I haven't seen it.
It's up on windowsclient.net, I believe.
Okay.
You can check that out.
Yeah, you should check that out and then see if we're missing, missing some things. It tends to look sort of more at a high level at the sort of conceptual differences, and then talks about some of the things that we've caught up in WPF, and particularly in the tools for VS10 that I think narrows the gap quite dramatically.
So it used to be that the story was, particularly with controls and particularly with RAD tooling, that the advice was if those were things that were really important for your shop and for your project, that you should go with Windows Forms. That's no longer true, and you should certainly be considering WPF for those projects now.
We should, I have some stuff we can give you if you want to, or if you check my blog, it's blogsmsdn.com/JaimeR. I can put your internal. We don't have a gap like control by control, but we tend to focus on the higher level pictures, which is like, hardware acceleration, resolution independence, vector graphics. So there's a huge, it's just comparing apples to oranges when you're looking at WinForms and you're looking at WPF.
So I head up a practice of UX guys. Many of them are seasoned WinForms developers. And so I have two problems. One, compelling the customer to go with what I think they need to go with in terms of either of those technologies. And two, compelling my organization to train my guys on WPF, Silverlight, all these things, and moving away from tried and true technologies that they're already trained in.
On the sort of proof side of things, or the business side of things, we've worked with a lot of companies about moving their WinForms applications to WPF, and found it relatively straightforward because obviously the business logic can stay the same, or often it's just the UI layers that change, and that can often be done very quickly. So it maybe one we should sort of crank up some of those case studies and get them published so we can give you some better evidence about people who've already done it and what the gotchas were and what worked and what didn't work.
It's a lot easier now than it was before.
Yeah, I think you make a good point of now would be the time for that because the tooling is getting better.
This time last year we were very cagey and we would go into, well, what exact scenario have you done? And now we're sort of much more bullish, and now the tools and the platforms come a long way. We can sort of, I think we can now cover maybe 80 or 90% of the cases where if you haven't written an app yet and you really do get to the side, you can probably go with WinForms, with WPF or Silverlight. If you already have a WinForms application, it's not going away, so you don't feel like you're compelled to move off WinForms unless you think there's a good reason. We're very careful about protecting existing investments. But if you want some of these new features, I think that it's probably a good thing, a good time to move. And it's not all or nothing as well. Either you can separate your business logic from your presentation layer, or you can mix and match. And that's one of the big impetuses behind some of the text work we've done, because it allows the sort of native Win32 GDI looking stuff to look, for WPF to look more like the existing Win32 stuff. So you don't see the differences. And that was some of the complaints that we got. If you wrote a pure WPF application, people didn't notice the text fuzziness issue as much. But if you put GDI and WPF right next to each other or in the same UI, then it was really glaring that there was something wrong. So there's things like that that we've done. They're a little bit lower level to try and ease that transition.
So that's really great for.
Sorry, guys.
That's really great on the technical side.
Yeah. But you need the business.
On the business side, I'm having a bit of a struggle because, especially with a lot of the presentations that we saw here at MIX, it feels like the cost of development for WPF is more expensive because, in addition to usability resources, we also need designers and interactivity designers and those types of things.
I'd be careful because if you compare doing the same kind of thing in WPF as you could do in Win32, it's basically the same. It's just that if you then wanted to go further and have maybe a more consumer-oriented UI, beyond, I mean, some of it's just the themes. Like, we've shipped a bunch of themes. You can just pick a theme. You don't have to do anything, and you don't have to hire a designer or do anything complicated to just add a slightly better look to your UI. But if you do want to go further and make it more consumerish, then yeah, maybe you want to either tweak the themes that we have or hire a designer. But those are things that you wouldn't do in WinForms anyway. You would get the Win32 look in WinForms, and you just stop there. So for apples to apples, I don't think there's really any dramatic difference. It's really that just on the WPF side, we let you go further if you want to. But for a lot of enterprise and line of business applications, you don't need to do that. And certainly not often in your first version. It's really often the first versions, you're just trying to get them functional and usable, and you should get that out of the box without having to hire any designers or do anything. And the auto layouts and the data grid and all those new features should let you do that. So again, maybe we can talk offline, and that's our sort of assumption, and that's what we're hearing from a lot of customers. So we think it's true, but maybe it's not. And so maybe there are things that we need to add.
One last thing. I get all that, and it sounds really great. The problem is that you guys are doing such a good job selling WPF with all of these wonderful demos that the customers want those things,
okay.
right?
No, we're raising expectations.
So what I would love to see are some really good showcase line of business applications in WPF.
We've posted, who's done some?
Like, I have one called Southridge. It's posted on my blog, and we're actually right now doing hands-on labs for how to create it from beginning to end. Including architecture like view model and everything else. So you saw like the data model he uses comes from Southridge. So we have a couple of those. I can tell you today, in the next month and a half, we're going to do what we call a WPF for line of business training all around the U.S. It's going to be 2-day training. Carl Shiplett, myself, and a bunch of other WPF guys. Carl Shiplett and myself and all of them. And then depending on the city, if there's a local WPF disciple or something, they're going to help us out. That we'll probably announce that next week. We just got dates last week. It's 2 days. It'll be free. We want to get a lot of people in there. So, and we're going to talk line of business only. We're going to have pretty looking apps, but we're not going to have flying animations and stuff like that.
I think you just announced it.
Yeah.
So, and then, well, the official times will announce. And then the other thing I would tell you is actually, I do a lot of line of business apps, and I'm not going to if you're going to just crank out 2 screens. WinForms would probably be faster because you don't have to ramp up. But if you look at the feature set we have in WPF with data binding, data trigger, commanding, all the other stuff, I can tell you that for most line of business that I write, we tend to actually get done faster with WPF than we would if we had Windows Forms or MFC, just because there's so much power behind data binding and behind all the other stuff. So if you have the time to architect a decent app and it's more than 3 screens, you're likely going to be better off with WPF, and you get the whole future of SAML, tooling, Silverlight, everything else. So we'll post all that information out there. It's good feedback for us.
We've only got time, I think, for one more question.
We can take you offline.
But then we'll go outside, and we can take more questions outside. They're going to kick us out of the room.
We have in WPF for full support for pixel and vertex shaders.
Can you say that again?
Vertex shaders?
For pixel and vertex shaders.
Pixel vertex shaders? I don't think we have support.
Like XNA?
Like XNA? I don't think we have support for that. We're doing pixel shaders, not vertex shaders.
I know this is on the graphics team's list, though.
Yeah, it could be. We should maybe we can talk offline. And
but it's not WPF4.
I didn't bring the graphics guys with me, so we'll have to.
It's on the futures list.
Okay. And alpha key video support. Alpha key video. Alpha key video.
Oh, alpha key video. We don't.
You can do that in a shader today.
Yeah.
But the shader is not good
for
pixelating the edge.
Yeah, I think for that you have to drop down to XNA or DX, the raw DX. We don't have, not that I'm aware of. I'll have to go look.
Well, feel free to talk to me offline, and we would like to get your scenarios.
Yeah.
We do have a good pixel shader. Maybe hopefully we could get Adam Smith to blog it. He has a really good example of pixel shader that he used for alpha, and it looked really good. So I don't know if it was specific to what he did, or so maybe we could talk offline and see if we could help.
Let's take your questions in the back.
Yep.
We're
out of time.
Thank you, everybody.
Coming.